What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a vintage Kenner Star Wars market update. I've got a number of items that were carryover from this past weekend and into this week that I just didn't have a chance to go over. And I wanted to start with a few items from a seller that we looked at in the last market update video. And a subscriber and friend and someone I bought from, Jeremy B., he's raised a good point about this seller, and I'm not accusing the seller of anything, first and foremost, but I want to throw the facts out there about what's going on with some of this seller's auctions. And also, in full disclosure, I purchased an AFA 85 loose graded Death Star droid this past weekend from this seller. And I know that there were no shenanigans with that one because Chris W., who's a friend of the channel, and he's got his, the Rogue 5 Vintage Toys Facebook sales page. He's been on live streams. He and I were bidding against each other, unbeknownst to each other. So I showed him that I won it, and my bid barely beat Chris's high bid that he put in at the last minute. So his bid was clearly the last bid before I bid, and ours were close enough, and I barely beat his bid. So what I'm trying to say is I bought from this seller before, and I didn't have any issues with it. It arrived yesterday. I'm very happy with the figure, very happy with the price. The price was less than what a UKG 85 just sold for this weekend as well, for the exact same figure. But I got an AFA 85, which I consider to be a little bit better. No offense to UKG or CAS, but AFA items tend to command a higher resale value. And the fact that I got an 85 droid, Death Star droid, for the price I did, I was very happy with it. But all of that being said, some of the items that closed last night from this same seller, it leaves me scratching my head, and I'm not really sure what is going on with it. And, this was an AFA 85 Yoda brown snake, Hong Kong. Nothing exciting about this figure. This is not a PBP or a POC. It's not like a Lily Letty or anything, it's just, or Meccano. It's just a straight brown snake Hong Kong. And it's an AFA 85, admittedly, which is nice. But these are not very difficult to find, and they're not very difficult to find for about a third of this price. So I'm just really confused as to why this thing sold for $650 on 34 bids plus $15 shipping. And what Jeremy raised is that if you look at the bidding history, this seller has made all of the bidding private. And I'm just saying that it's a little weird. It's a little weird, and there's going to be accusations of shill bidding, right or wrong. When you have private listings like this where we can't see the bidder's identity, one way that a lot of really good sleuths, internet detectives in the Facebook groups, one way that they out shill bidding processes is they can look at who's bidding and look at, and figure out who's bidding, and if they're bidding on the same items, and if they're barely winning, or if items are getting won by the same person and then it's getting canceled and relisted, that's usually evidence that they're shill bidding. When you go private like this, and I'm not saying that, I'm not accusing the seller of anything, but when you go private like this, it opens up the question as to what's going on, because $650 for a loose graded AFA 85 brown snake Yoda, that's just a standard Hong Kong figure, is ridiculous. That's highway robbery. And one other factor that could come into play is the whole international factor, is that a lot of buyers maybe on their own eBay, let's say they're in Australia or wherever, UK, maybe they don't have access to some of these AFA graded figures like we do in the US, and they don't come up that regularly overseas. If you look at AFA graded versus UKG graded items over there, UKG dominates over in the UK and Europe and everything, because that's what's closest to them, and that's what is mainly being used to get graded over there because of shipping costs. So there is a subset of folks, a subset of high-end collectors that are willing to pay a premium for AFA 85s and above. And if you happen to be watching this video and you were one of the winners on one of these items that sold, I'd be curious, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you on yes, hey, I paid that. Maybe you don't want to announce yourself as being one of the ones that paid that, but some of these prices just are a little bit questionable. But the fact that this seller does ship, only to the United States, and he's excluding everything else. It's only in the U.S. that he's willing to ship to right now. So that means somebody in the U.S. paid $650 in theory. And like I said, I bought from this seller. I was very happy with my purchase, but these prices are insane. Here's another one, an AFA 85 Lobot for $280 plus shipping. I mean, the last AFA 85 Lobot just sold for like $140. I mean, that's double. It's literally double. And so I just have a real problem believing that this is a real bid. Now, this seller takes excellent photos, very detailed photos, very crisp and clear. You can see every little detail on the figure, and so that could be a factor. Is that when you have blurry and less desirable photos versus something like these where you can see every little defect. I mean, look at the hands on Yoda. You can see every little defect on there, on his toes even, and which I credit the seller for that. But the final sales prices don't make any sense to me, unless it's either new money, funny money that doesn't know what to do with their money, so they're buying these high grade figures, but they're overpaying for them, or there's something else going on. Here's another one that the seller had that closed last night. This one was an AFA 85 21B Hong Kong flat paint. This is the flat paint version. There's a semi-metallic, metallic, and all that kind of stuff. But this is the flat paint. There was literally, as this auction was going, there were two same grade, same case, same COO, same flat paint variation that were listed for $20 less than what the final sales price was on this. So, it doesn't make much sense to me, but this is what it is. Now, those three really stood out to me as questionable, okay? Really, maybe not even the 2-1B, because that was only $20, plus or minus. People in the heat of the moment, in the heat of auctions, they can sometimes overpay. I've been guilty of it. Guilty as charged, sir. Guilty as charged, Your Honor. But some of these, like the Lobot and the Yoda, the price disparity is so egregious. It's just so blatantly way over market that it just makes me question what's going on there. So now I want to show some of the other items that ended last night, though, and the prices for the most part were pretty reasonable. You had an AFA 80 Hong Kong Luke Fromboy that sold for $307, probably in line with market. You had a 75 plus that sold for $193, in line with market. The Leia Hong Kong 75 plus for $338, it might be a little high, but given that we just saw one sell for $600, and admittedly it was the same seller, but I mean, we've seen some high-grade Leias that have sold for, $500, $550 plus. So $338 seems high, but it may not be. 75 plus Vader for $157 and a 75 plus Obi-Wan for $151 seems high. The Han Solo for $177. I mean, that seems ridiculously high. But what I'm trying to get at is that these prices for all of these that ended last night, $179 for a Hong Kong R2, probably okay. An 80 plus Hong Kong C3PO, that sold for $127. That even seems low to me. But what I'm trying to get at is that all of these others that ended last night, the price seems pretty reasonable. Okay, so I don't know if there's really much funny business going on there, but I do question at a minimum these two, the Lobot and the Yoda. It's just crazy prices. All right, so I've beaten a dead horse. So let's get back to some of the other items that I haven't covered yet. This was another one, CAS 85 R2D2 baggie. This was the ESBA baggie. I thought this price was great. Only one bid, $337 for a CAS 85 plus shipping, so about $350. I mean, for a CAS 85 sealed R2D2 baggie, that's a pretty good price in my mind. Graded. Here's one that I was watching immediately because, as you guys know, I purchased the sealed in box Millennium Falcon diecast. Well, lo and behold, this one popped up, and this is a U-85 diecast TIE Fighter. So it's part of that same line. I don't have the TIE Fighter yet, but I just wanted to see if it would sell, and it sold for $400 for a U-85. And look how hideous, and no offense to AFA, but this case is hideous. Absolutely hideous. I mean, you got these big white blocks, acrylic blocks that literally block up almost the entire vehicle. I mean, it's just hideous. And if you want to see a really nice example of how to encase these things, CAS knows how to encase diecasts, the diecast vehicles. And in fairness to AFA, they don't really do loose diecast vehicle grading anymore. that will most likely change, I would think, because they're opening up new toy lines to loose grading. They just announced whatever it was, Indiana Jones and DC Superpowers and things like that. But they need to get with the program in terms of loose grading. No offense to AFA or UKG, but you cannot compete with the loose grading cases for CAS for at least for vehicles and some of the the larger vehicles like the land speeder and things like that. They just do a fantastic job. Loose graded figures, I would say that they're all pretty much equal now that UKG has added laser etched laser accessory cases, things like that. So anyway, that one did sell though. It sold for $400 and it didn't take long. It did not take long at all. I watched it and it sold that later that day. And I think part of the price for that is because it's uncirculated. There's a subset of collectors that love uncirculated grading. I don't particularly care. There's a lot of people that absolutely hate uncirculated. They're like, it's bad for the hobby, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's too late. All right. These were encased many years ago. So I don't know if it necessarily, I'm not willing to pay a premium for them, personally. But I don't loathe them or super like them like some collectors, on both sides of the fence do. Here's another one that I didn't get a chance to talk about just because my video was running long, but this one was an AFA 8041 back A survival kit offer, Chewbacca. I thought this final price was pretty good. It was punched, but it was clear blister. The sub scores were 80, 85, 85. That one sold for $529. $529 took that home. I thought that was a great price. And I would pay that. I would pay that in a heartbeat. I think that was a great price, whoever picked that one up. This one sold 2 days ago, and I pointed it out to Chris because Chris W. With Rogue 5 Vintage Toys on Facebook, he's got a really nice Canadian Empire Strikes Back mint on card run going. And I said, you should buy this. You really should. He's like, it's going to go too high. It's going to go too high. Well, it didn't. It ended up not going too high. But this is the 47 back Canadian Imperial Hoth Stormtrooper. Now, the 47 backs are a little bit more unique than even, some of the other ESB card backs. It's got this kind of black box below the Kenner there where it's got the Toronto logo on there. It's got the Feta Hong Kong. I can't pronounce it. But, it's got the French down there as well as up there on the top. And here is the back of the card back, which is awesome because it's got multi-language for the 4-LOM offer on the back. But this card back, you don't see come up very often at all. It looked to be in excellent shape. Had one little ding on the blister there, but he and I both thought it would go for over $1,000. And it did, it did sell for only $709 US, which I thought was a fantastic deal. Fantastic deal. So somebody got a real steal there, in my opinion. Here's one that I was looking at. There's a 48 back AFA 75 Bosk and beautiful clear blister. I was watching it just to see if it would sell, and it did sell. It was originally listed for $1,000. It sat, and then he dropped it to $880, and it sold immediately. So beautiful card back though, and that sold pretty quick once he dropped it back down to closer to market value. This Australian seller had a number of really nice cards that sold last night at a weird hour, like 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought about one of them, but I decided to be good. But this was a U.S. card, Princess Leia in her indoor combat poncho, but it was a nice clean card. You can see the waffle pattern there on the blister, so it's legit. Unpunched, really clean though. And what's interesting about this one is that it was kind of a miscut. So if you look at the back of the card, if I can find a good shot here, you can see how the UPC was kind of miscut on the bottom, and then you go to the top, and it's got, clearly what I guess looks like maybe the next card, as they were cutting those cards, it got miscut. So it was cut too high on the top and too low on the bottom. If you can see right here. Come on, there we go. Now, sorry. Let's see if we can do a better angle. There we go. So you can see how this was totally miscut. It's missing the entire bottom line there and part of the UPC code, whereas the top was cut way too high. So that's just kind of an interesting factory error. But anyway, that one sold for $199 plus $30 shipping to the U.S. This one surprised me a little bit. It went a little higher than I expected. It was a nice clear blister Chief Chirpa with the Emperor offer, the 65 back. And that one sold for $305. That seemed a little high to me, but it is kind of tough to find those Ewoks on a clear blister, and the price paid reflected that. Yet this was a clear blister Han Solo, unpunched too. This is 77 back, This is another one that's very tough to find in a clear blister. That one actually sold for less than the Ewok did, so I was a little surprised about that. I was thinking this one would sell for closer to $400, but a beautiful Han that I think would easily get an 80. It did have a little bit of corner wear down there, but otherwise a very, very clean card. But I was surprised it only sold for $290. I was expecting, 25% higher than that. Here was another one. This is a yellowed 77 back Rancor Keeper. We all like to talk about Malakili these days after the massive failure that was the HasLab mess of the Black Series Rancor. But this one, this beautiful vintage Rancor was graded 80 overall with some higher sub scores. It had, let's see, 290 sub scores and then the 80 score for the car. But it was a yellow blister. That one sold for $180. I thought that was a great price for what it was. Here was a Lumat AFA 80 Power of the Force card, unpunched. Really nice deal there for $332. I thought that was a pretty good value. This was ungraded, but a pretty nice looking Luke Skywalker in his battle poncho, another last 17 figure. It was unpunched. Card wasn't perfect, but it's probably easily a 75 overall, if not even a low 80. And that one only sold for $310 plus $25 shipping. So to me, that was a pretty good steal, if you ask me. Here was an AFA 70 plus Tig Fromm. Tig Fromm continues to go up and up and up in price. This one sold for $726. We saw a couple of examples here recently that sold for higher than that. And this one did have, it looked like a hole punch in the card there, which I didn't notice before, but it's got a little hole punch there. So that, that card score was a 70 as a result, which I think that was probably even generous, really. Blister 85, figure 80. So that hole punch really held the final score back, as it should, because I don't think that was a factory thing. But anyway, 726. But we've seen a couple that have sold in the 900 to 1,000 range, so that was interesting to see yet another Tig Fromm sell, because he's not that plentiful. He's not easy to find. And then another droids to finish off the video was this A-Wing pilot. Very difficult to find this one on the droids card back. But another last 17 figure that continues to command big money. This one did have the clear view case, but it was graded 75, 85, 85, and that sold for almost $1,000, which you'd expect for the droids card back A-Wing pilot. It's just very hard to find in high grade. But anyway, it was just the beginning of the video is really food for thought, fuel for discussion, and I'd love to hear what folks have to say about that. And, again, I'm not accusing the seller of anything, but there's enough kind of weird data points between the last market update video with his items and then this market update video, plus the privacy settings for the bidding, as Jeremy pointed out, that I think it's worth at least raising the question of what's going on with some of those bids. But anyway, if you like this kind of information and you're new to the channel, welcome. Please consider subscribing. To my Patreon supporters, as well as all my other friends of the channel, thank you so much, and I'll be back soon.